So we'll start on the inside of the foldable. Please copy the following sentence. Feudalism, a political and socio-economic system based on land ownership and political alliances. So once you have copied the sentence, as you can see, we're going to look at two things. So feudalism is quite a complicated word. It's a historical concept. So this means I can't show you a text, which is a medieval text, where the word feudalism is used. It's a word used by historians to describe medieval society, specifically now in Europe. So feudalism is a system which has two pillars. It has a political pillar and a socio-economic pillar. Please copy the following words, political and socio-economic. The line in the middle is representing the folding line of your sheet of paper. So as you can see, I have drawn a pyramid. This is something you probably recognize as a symbol which we use to describe a hierarchy. A hierarchy of een hiërarchie of een rangorde is dus een systeem waarbij heel weinig mensen aan de top heel veel macht hebben en heel veel mensen in het onderste gedeelte heel weinig macht hebben. Dus als je dit gekopieerd hebt, ben je klaar voor de volgende. So at the top of the political system in feudal society, we see the royal dynasty, de koninklijke familie. So this is the king and queen and family. So they have a lot of power, and lots of people could argue they have all power, but as you will see later on, that's not really true. So the rest of the pyramid, as you can see, I have added two lines. Please make sure that the line is approximately the same, okay? It's with a purpose that there are smaller and bigger chunks within the pyramid. So the political system is based on the estate system. Het standensysteem of de standenmaatschappij. So the estate system is a system which divides everyone within society except for the royal dynasty in three big chunks. The first one is the first estate, that's the clergy. The second estate, that's the nobility. And the third estate, the commoners. De clergy betekent de klerus of de geestelijken. Dat is dus iedereen van het laagste niveau priesters en nonnetjes tot het hoogste niveau bisschoppen. Nobility betekent adel, aristocratie of de edelen. En commoners betekent het gewone volk. So as you can see on this slide, I have already added the numbers. So 1, 2 and 3. So please copy that. So the first estate, the second estate and the third estate. De eerste stand, de tweede stand en de derde stand. The first estate, if you could please copy clergy, and the third estate, if you could please copy the word commoners. Now, the most complex estate, one could argue, is the one of the nobility. As you can see, I have drawn a dotted line. That's because you had lords and knights. Lords were higher nobility and knights were lower nobility. So the position you had in life, whether you were a lord or a knight, depended on the amount of land that you got from the king. So we're going to focus now a bit more on land ownership. So who owned land? Well, theoretically, the king was the owner of the land. That means the king owned France, the English king owned England, the Spanish king owned Spain. That's the idea. Now, if you could turn your foldable and draw on the back side, I'm going to show you first what we need to draw, so don't panic, you don't have to draw it straight away. I'll take you through the drawing one step at a time. So now we're on the back side of the foldable. So this is what we will draw in the end. Don't start copying straight away. So we're going to focus on land ownership and protective alliances, which were the basis of feudal kingdoms. As you can see, there's a key here, so key and legende. I'll take you through it one step at a time. So as you can see, you will need 4 colors. So a blue, green, red, and black. The first thing you draw is a square. So this square represents a country, a feudal kingdom. This could be France, it could be England, it could be Spain, it doesn't matter. So just so you know, you don't need to copy this exactly. The idea is that by making this drawing, you really understand how land ownership was divided amongst lots of people in the Middle Ages. We have seen on the pyramid that the royal dynasty, and of course the head of the royal dynasty is the king, owned all the land. So as you can see from the key, with the blue line here, this is the land owned by the king. So this is the entire country of France or England and so forth. Of course, the king can't be everywhere at the same time. So he needs to focus. So he needs to take land which he controls nearly 100%. And these chunks of land, chunks betekent stukken, these chunks of land are called royal domain, het koninklijke domein. So he will keep the best bits of land for himself. That means where there are lots of people, where there are rivers, perhaps a bit of trade, a little town or a little city. So these are the best bits. As you can see, I have drawn circles, so if you could draw some circles, and I have used a dotted line. Okay. Of course, the king needs to govern and protect his country. De koning moet zijn land gaan besturen en gaan beschermen. He cannot do this by himself all the time and everywhere. So he needs help. And that's where the lords come into the picture. The lords of the heren are the men who are given land by the king himself. And I have represented them here in the rectangular squares or, well, the rectangles I mean. So it doesn't matter if you don't copy all of them, just, you know, if you copy some of them, that's fine. It's just the exercise that counts. So as you can see, there are lots of lords who all have dominion, heerschappij, over their own little fief. Of course, the medieval society is also a very religious society, and the king or a lord could do that as well, will give land to the church. So as you can see, the red dots here are a representation of land owned by the church. And as you can see, sometimes they own small pieces of land and sometimes they own large chunks of land. And the church could own land or was given land within the royal domain, within the fiefs of the lords, or it could be just in the country as well. And as you all know, the feudal system is also based on protective alliances. That means that the king needs a bit more help than just, you know, the 10 lords who will fight with him against invading people. So we need a lot of knights as well. And that's what these black dots represent. So this is land given by either the king or the lords to knights. So as you can see, if you were a knight, you had less land than if you were a lord. And as a lord, you had less land than if you were a king. So once you have, you know, understood this system, I think you now really understand how land ownership worked within feudal society. So, if you could please now mark protective alliances. Protective alliances, dat betekent beschermende bondgenootschappen. Dus een bondgenootschap is een soort van afspraak die je maakt met iemand. En de reden van de afspraak hier in dit geval is om elkaar bescherming te bieden. Dus dat je elkaar in geval van problemen gaat helpen. So if you could turn your foldable now and go back to the front, so with the pyramid. So the next question we'll ask is, how did the distribution of land and protective alliances work? Hoe werkte dat nu precies, die verdeling van dat land, in combinatie met die beschermende bondgenootschappen? Je kent wel de spreuk, voor wat hoort wat. Ik doe iets voor jou, dan moet jij iets doen voor mij. Hoe heeft dat nu een impact gehad op die feodale samenleving? So you can see that I have added here the words vassal. So if you could please copy the red words, vassal. So a vassal was a person who received land from a person that was higher within society. So a lord could get land from the king, and a knight could get land from the lord. This land that was given is called a fief. A fief, of een leengoed, is een stuk land dat in leen wordt gegeven door iemand die hoger in de samenleving staat. In return for the fact that they were given land, which meant that they were given people, food, whatever came with the land, they had to give something back. So they had to give loyalty and service to the person above them. Trouw en diensten. So services that could be providing food. For example, if the king said, people within my royal domain are starving because the crop failed, the oogst was mislukt, then other people had to give food. But it could also be military service, or it could also be counseling, en dus advies geven, raad geven. So it could be lots of things. So now we have spoken about the people that are mostly fantasized about when we talk about medieval Europe. So everyone, of course, wants to be a knight or a lord or a king. Perhaps some of you want to be clergy as well. I don't know. But most people actually were farmers. And the biggest group within the farming profession was the group of the serfs. So not serfs, but serfs. De lijfeigenen of de horigen. So serfs were just one part of the farming community. Some of these farmers were also free peasants. So free peasants were people who had a bit more liberties. Dus de vrije boeren hadden wat meer vrijheden. So serfs, the only thing that they owned was their body. In het Nederlandse woord voor serfs, lijfeigenen, vind ik, wordt dat heel goed uitgelegd. Dus het lichaam, het lijf, was het enige wat de lijfeigenen of de horigen bezaten. Een vrije boer kon ook een stukje grond afhuren van de lokale heer of de koning of de lokale ridder. Dus die hadden toch wel een iets wat ander statuut. Ik kom daar straks wat meer op terug. So where and how did people live? If we now look at the socio-economic side, we need to ask ourselves, where did people live? Because obviously, within the pyramid, this is a representation of a system. People didn't live in pyramids, of course. So how did they live? We have seen so far that within Europe there are lots of rivers. So the first thing you should draw is a river. So if you could please copy something like you can see here. And if you could also copy the green frame at the top. So you see the word manorialism. Manorialism is the socio-economic side of feudalism. It's a community, een gemeenschap, aan een fief, op een leengoed, with the manor at its center, met het landhuis in het centrum. You will see that the manor mostly was a castle. I'll come back to that straight away. So once you have copied that, please continue. You need to draw a line like this. This is a representation of a hill, because of course land is a bit higher up, away from the river. And of course that's the best spot to live and the best spot to build things. You also know that Europe was heavily forested, so if you could draw some trees like I have done here, approximately in the same spot. Doesn't matter if you draw one or more, less or more trees. Okay. And as I have told you, Europe was heavily forested. So if you could just draw a bit of greenery, so you can actually see that there was a big forest within Europe. It's supposed to happen. So a bit of carrots, cabbages and so forth. And then on the right side, you see 3 fields. So this is where they would perhaps grow a bit more produce, wat meer gewassen, where they would collaborate together. So where the men and the women and the children would farm the land together. And there's also a small bridge here, because of course they might have to cross the river. That would be a wooden bridge, of course. Now, if you had a community, perhaps you need something to protect yourself when, from the 7th century onwards, foreign people are invading the countries. We have spoken about the invading people of the Vikings, the Muslims and the Magyars. So people need to protect themselves and they need to organize their protection. So it was in their best interest to have a local leader who would protect them, and in return they would help to build a castle. So if you could draw a castle now, and if you could also draw the road that is going from the bridge to the castle, and then the road continuing into the forest. So we see there's already an organization within the owner of the castle, the person who lives in the castle. This could be a lord or a knight, or it could be the king as well. And the local community, namely the farmers. Let's move on. As you can see from the pyramids, we have 2 sorts of farmers. We have the serfs and the free peasants. So the people who lived between the river and the castle, these were the people who lived closest to the protection of the castle, and these people were serfs. So these people will farm the land for the Lord, and they don't own anything except their own body. Of course, the Lord can't protect everyone, and food is very difficult to come by in the Middle Ages, so the more land that is farmed and woods that are cleared, dus dat de bossen omgekapt worden, the better for the Lord. So lords sometimes gave peasants who lived a bit further from the castle the ability to be a free peasant. So on the lower part of your drawing, this is a farm owned by a free peasant. And of course, he farms as well. So on this slide, you see I have added a little church. So if you could draw the little church. A church, of course, was built because of the effort of the community. You will only build a church if there are lots of people to go into the church. And of course, this should be between the cottages and the castle. So the position of the church is also very important. They will not put a church in the middle of a forest, for example. The church could also be built in brick and could also be a safe building when people attacked the community. As you can see, I have also added numbers in the fields 1, 2, and 3. This is a reference to the 3-fields system, which you have read about. So the 3-field system was a new invention, a new kind of technology, one could argue, a new kind of knowledge that farmers developed in the high and late Middle Ages, and it actually meant that they divided the land into 3 chunks of land instead of 2. That means that they will have an increase in production, in food production, from 50% to 66%, which means more food, and of course that's good news. So now on the hierarchy, you see that with the commoners I have added merchants, handelaars. Dat kennen jullie al goed uit de vorige stukjes. So let's add a merchant on our drawing. That's the little guy in the right corner, which you can see in blue. So this is a guy driving or riding a cart, een karretje. And these are interesting people, because these were the people who were allowed to travel from one manor to the other, bringing in spices, for example, from foreign countries, so that the lord of the manor could have better tasting food. Or a merchant could bring beautiful cloth, silk cloth, for the lady of the manor. Perhaps some serfs had a bit of cash, or they could sell things like things that I have made. I don't know, a bit of toy that they made from wood to the merchant, and then the merchant could take it to another manor where he could try to sell it. So the merchants are really important because they will be the link between different manors. And of course, I'm talking about a socio-economic system. So of course, they will be very important from the moment that more and more people will start to travel from one manor to the other.